fantastic. It's great to see you, great to have you in the studio, great to hear your voice. Now tell us what's going on, Caroline.
Well, first of all, I want to say what fun it is to be sharing a microphone with you this morning, Rick.
It is nice, and I like the way your hand cups one ear, and you look kind of like Walter Cronkite sans 1970. And folks could see us right now because we happen to be on Periscope at Caroline_Phipps.com, YouTube on Caroline Phipps, and the website is CarolinePhipps.com. You can see us on all of those outlets. Now, Caroline, you're a regular guest here on the Up and Running Morning Show. We have you once a month on the program, and tell folks your mission.
My mission is to try to make the world a more elegant place. And this week, we've had quite the week, haven't we?
Of amazing events happening. The Russian plane, the events that happened in Paris, France. And, well, how are we supposed to react to these events, Caroline?
Well, I thought the song was really interesting, Ball of Confusion, because that's exactly how I feel we all are at the moment. The other line in the song is, and the band played on.
Which is true, and through tough times, entertainment is something that survives and stays really strong.
One of the interesting things to me today is that we're getting all these sort of sensations of disconnection and people doing harm and wanting to create chaos and confusion. And yet, at the same time, we are the most connected group of people, the most collective threads that we've ever had in the history of mankind. And of course, one of the threads that connects us is music.
It's true, and it was unfortunate, the events in Paris during an Eagles of Death Metal alternative band concert, that folks were kept against their will inside this place of joy, where folks were out to be entertained, to have a bunch of people in the same room together enjoying the same experience, and to be terrorized during the middle of it, well, it takes away our freedom to enjoy the arts.
And I think that something we need to think about within that is that we can all be very powerful conduits of elegance at the moment, because if we do experience all this overwhelm and fear and stop making music and stop coming together and start mistrusting one another, the dark powers that are at play here will start to prevail. And yet I believe it's in all of us to be elegant conduits at the moment for connecting with others.
But everyone has an internal fear within them, though. It's like, if I go out, maybe I'll meet my demise. So how do you get over that?
Well, I think we just need to keep ourselves as informed as possible, but without sort of going onto that constant loop of watching awfulness for the sake of it. I think we need to be informed, but I also think that we need to make sure that we're really connecting with one another. We are still going about our business and in a way to the essential goodness of human beings.
And sometimes that gets hard when you see the faces of evil around you. And to get above that, it takes a lot inside you. And then to go out and support live music and support the arts, and that I will do the best I can to keep bringing happiness into one's life, it becomes a little bit of a challenge. So how can you add a little more elegance to that, Caroline?
Well, I think one thing we need to remember is that let's just take the Parisian situation. For every story there was of awfulness, there were more people who were inviting people off the street into their apartments, not even necessarily knowing who these people were, There were cab drivers who turned off their meters to take people home. It's the idea that there is more goodness in the world than there is hatred. And if we can't go to that place and embrace that, then the world starts to get more and more shut down, and the darker forces prevail more and more. And I feel that we all have a sort of elegant moral responsibility to reach out, to connect, to obviously be mindful and careful, but not to succumb to it really, because I feel that that's almost what they're looking for, is to shut us down in a way.
And instead of the reaction of fear, which most people have, if you can react with kindness and giving, which is hard to do, and you have to separate yourself from the evil stuff that's going on, but if you can look within and then be able to know that love conquers hate and help the people if they need it, then, well, you feel good about yourself and you're doing a good job for everyone else on earth, which brings a great, moral standard to the people around you and makes others want to help and give more.
I think that's an absolutely valid point, because when you do something kind or generous for somebody, it's scientifically proven that you get a sort of endorphin hit in your brain. And we know that if we've been unkind, or we something unpleasant, we never feel very good, right? No. It's like, oh, I feel really ashamed. This is literally a horrible biological feeling I'm having, right?
After the adrenaline wears off, you find yourself feeling like, oh, what did I just do?
Yes, it's horrible, and I believe that because we are literally wired biologically that way, it gives me great hope that people are at their core essentially empathetic and kind and generous. And it seems to me that the ball of confusion we're in at the moment is exactly the moment to ourselves that we are essentially at our core, human beings are for the most part good.
For the most part. And one point that you highlighted to me is that kindness.
Yes, kindness always begins at home, and I think that we tend to look at world events and think, well, what can I do about France? What can I do about Syria and about a plane crash? But often we get so balled up in that we forget to be kind and generous with the people that we live with, just to begin with.
And it was, as of recent weeks, the streaming amount of people who are refugees on the planet and where they're going and how they're accepted by other countries, because they're fleeing where they are. And some are being welcomed and some are like, you're overwhelming our country, so please stay away. But how can people put more kindness in that situation?
Well, I think it's important that we try to understand people's stories. We've got the internet now, all of the news feeds and so on and so forth, and rather than think about people in a great big lump, it's very important, I think, to find individual stories in there, because the moment we understand individuals, they're no longer a sort of collective of them and us. Are real people, their families with children who are escaping often the most perilous situations, because you would never take that journey if it weren't absolutely necessary. So understanding one another's stories and on a human level, I think will help us to connect and remember our humanity, And I'm praying that the diplomacy and everything that's going on in the Middle East right now will help to. The Parisian situation seems to have brought everybody back together to try and, you know, resolve this. And I think maybe now we might be able to do something.
And we can only hope. So, to find out more about putting elegant tools in one's living toolbox, Caroline, what's the best suggestion?
The best thing to do is to visit my website, which is full of fantastic information about how to live a more elegant life, and that's carolinphipps.com. And to just remember that when our minds, bodies and spirits align, we just feel better, we go with the flow, and life is less complicated, you know.
Now, would it make sense to invite neighbors and friends over to discuss how they feel and what's going on in their world, and just open up communication amongst one another?
I think as much as possible we should do that. I often find that people don't even know the people who live a couple of doors down. I think it's a great idea if people extend invitations to meet one another. And we are going into the holiday season, right, where people do get together and there are more community activities and things go on. And now is the time really for more and more connection and understanding.
And it's a perfect time to give thanks and welcome your neighbors into your home and just say, hey, I made this apple pie and it's warm. I don't know you, and you've been living 2 doors down for 4 years next to me, and I don't even know your first name. So it's a great opportunity to get their story, to find out what's going on, and to, again, then not have that kind of, I don't know, they're kind of sketchy over there feeling like, I don't know what they do and I've never met them. But it may soften all the doors and break down barriers if you just take the time and say, how you doing? I'm Rick. What's your name?
Yes, we can't go to war with people that we know and we understand.
It's true.
I think the most important thing is understanding people's stories, understanding that we all have a different idea of the world, everybody's perception of the world is different, and that people have valid opinions, they may be different from ours, but essentially to really come together. I just can't emphasize that enough today, because I feel as if that's what the dark forces don't want us to do. They want us to keep at home, behind barriers and afraid. And it's in us all to help the situation right now. There isn't anybody who can't help what's going on in the world right now.
And things that people don't understand, if you take time to understand them and to ask questions about the people around you, and to understand who they are and what makes them tick. You don't have to exactly abide by what they believe, but just know that there's no reason to fight that person over something you don't agree with. So be friends with your neighbors, understand what they're all about, and be accepting of that they're different than you. They're an individual.
Well, that's it, Rick. And you always say, help people, don't hurt people. And you're such a role model in living. And so is this radio station. I mean, WKZE is community.
And we care about you who are listening to 98.1 KZE. And we want you to be able to live a better life. And if we can help just by a few words this morning, then we've done our job. So thank you, Caroline. Thanks for being here and being part of the Up and Running morning show. It's always an elegant pleasure of mine. I love talking to you, and I know that the feedback that I get from listeners, you're always welcome. And I give thanks and praise to you, especially around Thanksgiving. So thank you for all you do, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Rick, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with such an elegant gentleman this morning.
This is 98.1 KZE. CarolinePhipps.com is where you should go. If you have any questions, Caroline at CarolinePhipps.com. She'll answer your emails. She does that quite frequently. And sometimes she chooses an email at random to give some free advice to. And she is a well worth holistic health counselor and can definitely guide you to greater things. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Thank you very much for having me, Rick.
It's always a pleasure. We'll get you right back to more musical diversity after these very important messages from our sponsors.
An historic atmosphere. In the KZE region, there's only one place you'll find all three: Helsinki Hudson and the restaurant at Helsinki.
You know, when people are having a conversation, they usually don't step over each other.